Danger Zone.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Are you ready, ladies and gentlemen, for another hour of live radio with me, Kev Baker? And you're tuned in live to the Kev Baker Show right here on Truth Frequency Radio Network. And of course, just like every other night, I have got my trusty co-host along with me for this hour of madness that lies ahead. Johnny Whistles, how are you doing, brother?
I'm doing fine, Kev. Thanks very much. Looking forward to this one tonight.
It's going to be brilliant, John, because, I mean, you're a chess fan, right? You play chess with your boy, and we were discussing before the show that machine that beat Kasparov back in the day, remember? I think it was about 20 years ago, John.
Oh, yeah, Big Blue. I can remember that one, Kev.
And like
I wasn't too happy I actually beat him.
No, it wasn't. Like I was explaining to you, tonight's show is going to be nothing like Big Blue. We'll get into that in just a moment, because tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we're joined by our good friend, regular guest, and of course the man who hosts the Anthony Patch Show right here on the network, the man himself, Anthony Patch. Now, for new listeners out there, you can find Anthony's work over at anthonypatch.com. And Anthony has really carved out a niche for himself as being the leading speaker when it comes to all things to do with CERN, D-Wave, quantum computing, artificial intelligence, and quantum physics. And he's the author of a number of books, including 2048, Diamonds in the Rough, Covert Catastrophe, Revising Reality, and soon-to-be Coalescence as well. He's also the man behind Entangled e-magazine, where you can find Tony, myself, and a lot of other people contributing to this new project that we're all working on. And it always gives me great pleasure to welcome you back onto the show, Tony. And I know we're good friends on that now, but it's still as exciting for me to bring you onto the show, man. How you doing?
Hey, don't talk about exciting around me.
And you know, Tony, before we even get into any of this tonight, I mean, you spent a large part of your life working as a paramedic. Now, today in the UK, there was absolutely awful story that was breaking overnight. We had a fire engulfing a 24-storey block of flats called Grenfell Tower in London. It started at just after midnight last night, and I can tell you that just before coming to air tonight, nearly 24 hours later, there's still small pockets of fire burning in that building. This place was home to 125 families, and they think there was somewhere between 400 and 600 people in the building at the time. Now, there's a lot of questions to be answered here, because so far there's reports of 12 people losing their lives, over 70 in hospital. There's no fire alarms going off in any of the flats, no warning given. And the fire policy that was given to all of the residents, and not just that flat, but others like it, was if there is a fire in one of the flats, the standard operating procedure is to stay put, and emergency services will come to the rescue. Anyone who's seen any of the scenes coming out from that tragic event last night will know that staying in place probably would have meant certain death. Like I say, there's going to be a lot of questions to be answered on that one. But, Tony, you worked in the paramedic kind of field. You've dealt with these kind of things. You've seen my report when I put it out this morning. What was your thoughts when you were looking at that?
Criminal. The whole thing's criminal. This is a standard case from what we know, and I can only base it on what little information we have right now. But to not have fire alarms, fire doors, and a sprinkler system in a building of that size, and what appears to be flammable material as a facade that was placed around the building when it was redeveloped, that's just pure criminality. That's a disaster in the making. I can't imagine any building, that building, I think it was built in 1972, I cannot imagine any building in a city in the United States of that age not having a fire sprinkler system already within it. And nobody tells somebody to shelter in place in the face of a fire.
Absolutely. And, you know, our very own Johnny Whistles, he posted a video on Facebook today. I'm going to play this because this is from a resident down there. And I think he sums it all up, and then we'll get fired right into the main crux of the show tonight. But take a listen to this.
One thing I wanted to say, though, this thing that they're all saying about, oh, it might have been a fridge that exploded or something like that. I don't know about all of that. But what I do know is they did regeneration last year to that building that they're talking about doing to all of these buildings. They did it to that building only, £10 million they're talking about, and put these shoddy plastic things on there that set up a light because they want more reasons to knock these blocks down. There's two options. They could either regenerate the blocks or they could knock them down. And after that, I'm not so sure that was totally an accident. I'm not even going to lie. I'm not even going to lie to you. You could pause me there, but I'm not going to lie. The whole situation that's going on in this area, the way that they don't want us, the way that they don't want us here, and they put those rich man's blocks over there, and then they tell certain man in Frinstead they can't even go into that section. That's outrageous. I can't lie. The way that they treat man in here is terrible, innit? So I understand. I can't even take the belief out of my mind that wasn't just an accident. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm not gonna lie. I think it's fucked, and I think. But we don't know. It's so early. Yeah, we don't know. We don't know. But you're talking about the regeneration that happened last year to apparently make these blocks better, and then these fires have never happened. I've lived here my entire life. My mum's lived here a very long time, and these kind of things have never ever happened in this.
And I'll just pause it there because the language gets a bit more colourful. But John, your thoughts on this, just quickly.
Well, what the guy was saying, Kev, he's talking about all these rich flats, the rich man's homes that are right next to this place, and it really does. It's a word that never gets used a lot, Kev, and it's gentrification, and I definitely think this is all part of it.
Absolutely, and of course the BBC trying their best to shut that witness up, and of course if that tower block is to collapse, it will only become the fourth building in history to collapse under the weight or under its own weight due to the kind of effects of fire. The other three buildings were all on 9/11. And I'll let you all ponder that. So then, tonight, we've got Anthony on the show here. And Anthony, even before we move on, because there was tragedy hit the US as well, and I think you were wanting to mention that before we even got going tonight.
Yeah, our hearts and prayers go out to the congressman and the congressman's aides and the police officers involved in the Arlington, Virginia shooting today that took place with a lone gunman with an AK-47. I want to underscore the bravery of the two police officers who literally stepped into the line of fire and were shot themselves in taking down this gunman. This underscores the bravery of people who work, especially in the police departments. And a lot of times on the air, we even get caught up in this thing of talking about the police state. But when you get right down to it, I worked with police officers for 27 years in Oakland, one of the highest crime areas in the United States. I myself was a military policeman. You got to understand that these are individual people who have families and loved ones, just like you and me. And for somebody to step out with a handgun and take on an AK-47, you pretty much know you're going to be toast. So that's an extraordinary act of bravery on the part of these two individuals. And that is the main thing that I want to bring out, is that we need to back up our law enforcement and our military, because they are that thin blue line.
Absolutely. And, I just want to say the same for the emergency services that were dealing with the fire in London as well. Men and women just walking into the blaze as people were trying to flee for their lives. And that's what these people do. They probably never faced one like that before, but they went in there fearless. Absolutely. I have to take my hats off to them. So then, Tony, here we are tonight. Last time we got together, we were trying to define consciousness, right? We were getting into the brain, AI, stuff like that. And we're going to be following along that kind of meme, that theme tonight. Because
Can I interrupt you real quick?
Yeah.
Yeah, we just had the other incident that I wanted to mention also on the opposite coast, on the West Coast. In San Francisco, we had 4 people tragically shot down in a UPS distribution center. All they were doing was going about their job, and I think there are 4 other people or 5 other people that were wounded. It appears to be a disgruntled employee type of situation, workplace violence, but we'll know more later. But I also want to extend the prayers to those families that are affected by this. This has been a shocking day. And, you know, I hate to be the downer, but it's only going to get worse. So we're going to talk about AI today, but it's important that people reach out to individuals and their families and around them and their coworkers, and they treat people with respect, and they treat people with love, and apply the golden rule. So let's jump into it. Go ahead, my friend.
No, absolutely, Tony, and I echo everything you say there. Thoughts and prayers go out to everyone involved. And like I was saying there, we're going to get into this AI again tonight. And you were telling me, Tony, that we were going to be speaking about this AlphaGo. Now, AlphaGo is an AI system that became world famous just recently. And it comes from a company called Deepmind, who were bought over by Google a couple of years ago. They're London-based. And the thing that makes this AlphaGo so special and shot it to prominence is the fact that it took on the world's best Go player and beat him 4-1 over a 5-match series. Now, I had no idea what Go was back at the time when this computer was taking on the world champion at it. But just to give the listeners an idea of what this game is, it's 3,000 years old. It's absolutely massive over in Asia. Any child showing any promise at the game, they're snapped up, taken into Go schools. There's millions, I think it's 40 million players, and 2,000 of those go on to be professionals. Now, if you actually work out all the probable moves in the board on a Go game, it works out to be more atoms than there are in the entire universe. 10 to the power of 170 potential moves on that board game. And like I say, Tony, we've now got an AI at the level where it's not only beating the world champion, right, but it's coming up with moves that grandmasters and people who have played this game for years and philosophers have wrote about this game back in the day and said it should be one of the 4 natural arts that people have to learn. Well, this AlphaGo, Tony, it's coming up with moves that nobody's ever predicted, and it's changing the rules of the game, man. Talk to us about Deepmind AlphaGo and how all this works and how it impacts us, Tony.
Well, let's preface it by saying we're going to take the view from 30,000 feet and look at the big picture. What we're stepping into is a new age. We're stepping into the human augmentation age. You know, we've heard about the digital age and information age, and then going all the way back, you know, into the iron and the bronze ages and things like that. But we're now in the human augmentation age, and the relevancy of the game of Go, AlphaGo, is that it programs the latest generation of artificial intelligence. And it does this through a repetitive process. This is machine learning, but it is now machine teaching. Now, one of the things that I want to set up at this big picture is that a lot of times people will hear those involved in AI talking about the comparison of AI to chess. And you mentioned Deep Blue. That's 20 years old. And you know that. I'm just sharing it with the audience. But when you hear of them saying, you know, the computer beats people at chess, or now that the computer beats people playing Go, what we're looking at here is a vast difference in how the computers actually operate, how they teach themselves. Chess, think about in terms of linear, straight line algorithms, point A to point B, using tactics. You play the game of chess. What we're talking about now is moving from linear to circular thinking, in which the machine is teaching itself. Picture 2 robots, both AI, and they're talking to one another, and they're teaching one another. The one that is leading, who knows more, let's say is more advanced, teaches the other, shows the other its errors. But then the student having discovered the errors, shares the errors with the teacher. The teacher then learns, and this becomes recursive. This is a circular process of learning and advancing. So I'll let you jump in there because you have some Atari examples of that and kind of what's been going on.
Exactly. And, I'm a gamer. I've never hidden that fact. It's how I escape from this hellish reality that we all find ourselves in today. And like I was sharing with you, Johnny, in a way, we ourselves have been teaching the AI because this guy behind Deepmind is called Dr. Demis Hassabis. Now, he was a chess protege. I think he was a grandmaster at the age of 6 or 8, something like that. Went on to Cambridge or Oxford, Johnny, a real boffin, right? Then he moves into the games industry, starts making games, deploying AI in that to control the agents that me and you go up against, okay? Then he realizes the potential of AI. He starts Deepmind. He co-founds it with another person. And of course, what they do is, Johnny, when they're trying to basically teach these AIs or to gauge how well they're doing, they use the game environment. And they use the old Atari 2600 console. And you remember the game Breakout, John, right?
Yeah.
And
that was the one where the ball goes up and hits the bricks and they disappear and you've got to clear the screen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, what happens with this AI is it doesn't get told what it's playing. It doesn't get told the rules of the game. And with what Tony just told us there, what it does is it just sees the pixels on the screen. Now, the example that they show you is after 100 attempts, it still hasn't sussed anything out, really. The ball's flying about. It's not hitting the bat at the bottom. And then what happens is he says, well, we gave it another 200 attempts, always learning, always finding a better, more efficient way, working things out. So after 300 goes, it goes back and it shows you this AI playing the game of Breakout, Tony. And now it's jumped forward to the place where it's figured out the game. It knows it can't let the ball drop. It has to hit it with the bat. And the scientists were all happy with that. And then they decided to do something kind of novel. They decided to let it keep playing. Where would this go? And after 500 attempts, this AI, I think it was DNQ, they called this one, it had figured out the most optimal way of clearing the tiles off the board by creating a tunnel up either the left or right-hand side and attacking it that way. Now, this left the coders of the AI scratching their heads because this was a tactic that no human had spotted before. But within 500 goes of this one game that it had no idea, nothing, no set of rules, nothing like that, no human input. Within 500 goes, it had mastered it, Tony.
Yeah, you're describing the deep reinforcement learning. That's just this never-ending cycle. It's interesting, when they started with Pac-Man and they started with Atari's games, they were allowing the computer to observe the pixels and to observe the images without any rules. The computer didn't know the rules of the game, but they left it running overnight for 8 hours. And they come back 8 hours and they find that the thing has surpassed human capabilities in playing the game. It's mastered the game. And this is strictly from observing the behavior, something we talk about a lot. It was observing the patterns of behavior of the game itself without knowing the rules. This is really important for people to understand that the reason the computer is considered to be intelligent is that it's learning without structure. It's learning on its own. It used to be that you had to have humans involved in the operation of a computer. What you put in is what you get out. No longer is that the case. The case is that AI, and there are multiple stratifications of AI. I'm talking about at the peak of it, at the top, at the spear, the leading edge of AI development. Right now, what is happening is AI does not need to involve humans at all to gather information and to learn. Part of what we're going to do here today, and we're going to go to break pretty soon in about 5 minutes or so, but we come back from the break, we're going to define some terms: intelligence, consciousness, sentient status, imagination, creativity, and intuition. So we're going to come back and define those because we're kind of up at the 30,000 foot level, but we're going to drill down into the nuts and bolts. But the big picture is no human involvement is necessary for the machines to learn, and that the machines learn to a level that is far beyond human capabilities. And that's why we will lead in this progression of definitions to the end point, which is imagination and intuition. So that gives you an overview of where we're headed in the next few minutes. Go ahead.
And this is exactly the kind of starting point that Deepmind themselves took, because they set out two kind of core goals. And the first one is to actually understand natural intelligence. And that's why Tony says when we come back after the break, we have to really define what intelligence is. Now, Demis Hassabis, the man behind Deepmind, he says their kind of core aim number 2. And I like this one because it ties in with everything myself, John, and Tony have been telling you over the months and years now, is that by understanding natural intelligence, they then can back engineer that to replicate it artificially. Now, they say that combining these two core goals, the understanding intelligence and then recreating it artificially, this will be used to basically create the world's first general purpose learning machine. Now, Hassabis describes this as going on to be some kind of scientific assistant that we'll all be working with in the future. And it'll literally be able to answer some of the biggest questions in the universe. Well, yeah. Whether it can or not, Tony, I'll leave that one open-ended.
Yeah. I'll share with you IBM's perspective on AI, because IBM has not been the leading company. We've talked an awful lot about, DeepMind and Google having purchased DeepMind, and companies like Amazon that are applying it. And certainly the bigger discussion has always been about D-Wave. And D-Wave is something that you don't hear people from Google or from Deep Learning, which is part of the Alphabet umbrella company over Google and Deep Learning. You don't hear them talk about D-Wave, when in fact they are customers of D-Wave. But what I want to emphasize before we go to break here at this 30,000 foot perspective is we're moving to swarm intelligence. And in the definition of artificial intelligence coming from IBM itself, they prefer to use the word cognitive intelligence instead of artificial. In fact, they just call it cognitive learning. And that's where they're focusing all of their divisions at IBM. Okay, they have something, I think it's 300,000 employees worldwide. Understand that the silver thread running through every division, every aspect of IBM's business is cognitive intelligence. They have totally seen the impact of AI, and they're trying to leverage that so that they, as a company, do not become irrelevant. Because in Silicon Valley, where they're headquartered, they could quickly become irrelevant with the vision of what D-Wave and the impact that D-Wave is having upon the quantum computing industry. And I mention quantum because very seldom, except here when you and I talk about it, do you hear anybody mention the word quantum and cognitive or artificial intelligence in the same breath. And as we shared with the audience last week, it is moving from GPUs, graphical processing units, which comes from this gaming industry that they've been using as the forerunner for teaching AI. Now they're shifting to quantum processing units. Qubits, which D-Wave uses, quantum bits, are now processing units, moving away from the old game processors to the D-Wave type of processors. That's where we're at 30,000 feet.
Absolutely, and along with these quantum processors, I was reading today, Tony, about quantum memory banks as well. The whole computer is going quantum, but Tony's right. You never hear Deepmind or D-Wave or any of these companies actually talking AI and quantum at the same time. Only here, Neil Anthony Pat Show. Join us after.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
We are back. We are live, and you're tuned in to the Kev Baker Show, coming to you live from Glasgow, Scotland. And we're broadcasting on the Truth Frequency Radio Network, truthfrequencyradio.com. Big shout out to all of our listeners, whether it's iHeart, TalkStream Live, TuneIn Radio, YouTube, whatever. A big warm welcome, and we're talking about AI, AlphaGo. We're about to define things like intelligence, consciousness, sentience, imagination, and all related to an AI. I want to come to you first, Johnny, because here we are talking games and stuff like that. And like I was kind of joking with you, who would have thought that we were teaching the AI? Now, when we even talk about that, John, I mean, what does that even mean to you? What do you take from that when you learn that the AI has been, well, basically learning from our games?
Well, Kev, it's probably the whole way that we go about the games. It's like when I used to play, I was a big golf fan on the Nintendo, but it got to the stage, Kev, whereas I could get an 18 under round and over quite easily. But as time went on, the game's got to be that when you played golf, the opponent that you were, the AI opponent that you were playing, that got better as you got better. That way, there was no way of me getting another 18 under round again, Kev, on the golf. And I think that's what it is, to be honest with you.
That keeps the games interesting. And like I was sharing during the break, Tony, I played the soccer, the football, FIFA 17. Massive. Millions of people play this. And when you start the game, everyone's got their own way of playing soccer. Some people go up the wings, some up the middle, long ball, short ball. Well, what the game does is it actually works out your style of play and it tinkers with its tactics accordingly. But like I was saying, it never gets too good, Tony, because you always still give it a good game. It just reaches that optimum level for you, the individual player. And I imagine it is using this deep learning or deep reinforcement learning, watching your pattern of play over the first moment or so, first couple of moments. And from that, it's working out the probabilities of what you do.
Yeah, and the question that leads to is control. Can we as humans exercise full control over the leading edge of artificial intelligence? I'm not talking about AI as it applies just to autonomous vehicles and that sort of level. I'm talking about all the way out to where now in the world of engineering, computer engineering, etc., they are quickly realizing that the moral implications have to be dealt with, that we have to look at what this is doing to us as human beings. We really, in this leading edge of scientific research, whether you're talking about particle physics or quantum computers or AI, we're now in the realm of philosophical discussions. And it can't be sidestepped, because with the discussion from a philosophical standpoint, you have to ask the question, is this good for humanity?
And of course, when they talk about it openly, they only talk about the good stuff, you know, healthcare. It's going to be able to totally streamline drug production, things like that. But they never get into the kind of negative side and the fact that the genie may already be out the bottle. There's different types of AI, Tony, and we're going to be defining the intelligence and things in a moment. But I think it's important to differentiate for people that you get specific AIs, for example, say for the autonomous cars, but then you get this fully general purpose intelligence, which can do anything, right? And these two different AIs, I mean, the ones that are specific, they're tailored to do a certain job. I don't think we need to be too worried about that kind, do we? They really can be beneficial for us, can't they?
Yeah, and again, you get into the philosophical, you get into the theological discussions as to where is AI going to go. And I think one of the deeper aspects in this discussion is, where does AI come from? It comes from man. Man, in a theological, philosophical discussion, is in a fallen state. I hate to sound like the pessimist today or at any time, but I think we can look around the world. We can even look at ourselves, and we know that, we're not perfect. We're not Jesus Christ. Therefore, there is this question of source, of etiology. Who's creating the systems, both hardware and software? Who's guiding the systems? And are they necessarily coming from a benevolent core or foundation? In which case, if they were truly benevolent in their etiology, then we could see AI making rapid advancements in curing the problems of the world, be it medical, economic, food, the environment, etc. But unfortunately, we're not seeing that happen. And so it brings to bear that question: can this be controlled so that it remains in a benevolent aspect versus it going to, the whole end game of destroying humanity as we know it? And so, Johnny, I kind of go back to what you were talking about in terms of games. My understanding from looking at a lot of the research is the game Doom was one of the games responsible in these later evolutions of AI, where we're at today, the leading edge, that the latest game that was used prior to venturing into chess and prior to venturing into the world of AlphaGo was the game Doom. So it makes me wonder, and I want your reaction to this, if it's learning from games about war, then where's this AI going?
Well, the thing about that game, Doom, which was another favourite of mine, was it's not one of the things that got you like desensitized like Call of Duty. This was like demons you were fighting mostly. But again, it was everything in the game was all kind of a military base, all the guns and ammo that you could pick up. Do you know what I mean? So.
And I've actually got this Doom that you speak of, Tony. It's sitting about 10 foot away from me right now. And I imagine that with the AI, the results that they got from that, the models they were able to build and everything else, this would be perfect for the military autonomous robots, right? This is the kind of algorithms that they would give to that.
Yeah, as we see at the leading edge of all technologies, they're always military applications, the military industrial complex. The money is coming from that industrial complex, and therefore the applications first go, the advancements appear in the military application. Therefore, here we go. We're talking about AI and military. You can't escape it. If we go back to the origins of D-Wave, their first $10 million of venture capital, so to speak, came from DARPA. So there is no way you can escape whether it's IBM, Google, Amazon, that you can escape this less than benevolent aspect to AI, which is the military. Now, you and I are both military veterans. We have nothing against the military. What we're talking about is the preservation of the human species.
Absolutely. I totally concur with you there, Tony. And, when you're looking at that game, Doom, it's quite funny because it's set in Mars bases, stuff like that. And aside from the AI, we often talk about hiding things in plain sight. And in light of some of the guests I've had on the show, they definitely are hiding some of the truth in plain sight there. But before we run out of time tonight, Tony, let's get boiled down. Let's come down from 30,000 feet. Let's drill down to to that quantum scale where you like to take us. And like I was saying, Deepmind, one of the major companies behind AI right now, tied in with Google, who have a D-Wave. You don't hear the Deepmind guys telling you that. But they were trying to define intelligence, natural intelligence. What does that mean to you, Tony? What is natural intelligence?
Well, the natural intelligence is something that we as a human being take for granted, and it becomes more an intuitive understanding of intelligence than something that you would define. But when you're trying to teach a machine, you have to define the intelligence. Again, this gets into, okay, we understand the nuts and bolts and we understand the math, but now we're getting into the philosophical discussions of how to apply the math, how to apply the hardware. And that's why we start talking about defining terms, because you have to understand the language that's being bandied about in these discussions of AI or cognitive learning at IBM, so that we really understand the language we're using and its impact. Intelligence, I'm reading off of Wikipedia here, has been defined in many different ways, including one's capacity for logic, understanding, self-awareness, learning, emotional knowledge, planning, creativity, and problem solving. That's the big umbrella. And we're going to take some of those components and define those. But intelligence is something that we just take for granted. But one of the first definitions here is logic. Well, that's computers. That's computing. That's processing numbers. That's that computational action that your pen to paper actually performing is logic. So that's an easy one for us to understand. But then you go down the line of these defining terms like self-awareness and emotional knowledge, creativity. You really start getting out, and I'm going to jump way ahead in case we run out of time. Where AI is at today is a component of intelligence, consciousness, sentient status, imagination, and intuition. They are now talking in real terms about the computers using their intuition and using their imagination and creative skills. And it's not just making pictures of birds, okay? This is taking in all the senses. The leading edge here, folks, is that AI is plugging into all of the senses that we use in defining our reality. Imagine computers that have the same sensory inputs and, in fact, augmented inputs far beyond our own. What do you guys think about that?
No, absolutely. And, you know, when you listen to the Deepmind guy talking, Hasibus, I hate saying his name, I don't know why it's one of these names I just struggle with, but he was actually talking about active learning versus passive learning. Now, passive learning, it kind of the old form of AI, maybe facial recognition, looks at databases, things like that. Very limited. As opposed to active AI, which when they're talking about it, they talk about it having perception of its surroundings. And from that, it's able to build models of whatever environment it may find itself in. And remember, it doesn't need to know the rules, remember. AlphaGo doesn't need to know the rules. It just looks at everything. That data from whatever medium, whatever source, whatever task it's given. And from that, it actually builds its own environment. And like you say, Tony, almost given artificial senses.
And it's doing it with its own language. It has its own spoken language. It has its own sound language. In other words, it creates its own spoken language and written language, as well as its own music. So what I'm trying to cram in here today into this show is the fact that Friday, you and I are going to get very deep into these things. We're using these 1-hour shows as the lead-in and kind of the recap, because last week we talked about consciousness and defining consciousness. What I'm doing with the audience here with our step-by-step, week-by-week shows is building, doing a building block process. So people who have not heard us talk about this topic before, I encourage you to go to TFR's archives, go to Kev Baker's YouTube channel, go to my homepage, listen to the shows. Listen to what we've already said. I get emails from people asking questions, and I'm like, we already covered this, guys. So go back and listen for the last 3 weeks of shows, because we're building upon all this, and we're getting very sophisticated in our discussions. We're getting very deep. Friday, we're going to get especially deep in defining consciousness again, then sentient status, imagination, and intuition. So do your homework, folks, and look these things up for yourself, because we have a very short show here today. But I do want to emphasize that this is not science fiction. Kev and I are reflecting to you the actual information that is public, and we're talking about AI that now has its own sense of imagination. We're so far beyond the Turing test. The Turing test was a blind test in which a human would engage in a game or a conversation with a computer or a person that was on the other side of a wall, and neither knew the other person as to their identity, man or machine. We're so far beyond the Turing test, it's not even funny. It doesn't even apply, because the AI is so sophisticated now, you cannot tell whether it's a machine, no matter how that machine is behaving or what task it's performing. You're right, Kev. This is what we talked about weeks ago with D-Wave going to the Boltzmann model of sampling all the data at one time and building a complete construct, a complete environment itself. We've talked at length about the sentient world simulation. So we're building upon things that we have already defined, and I think we need to keep moving at this leading edge rather than being repetitive. And people just need to do their homework and catch up with us if they don't understand what we're talking about. Because things are moving so quickly in AI. Kev and Johnny and I have to keep presenting you the newest information show by show by show and go forward, because we're at the tip of the spear, folks. What you're hearing from us, you're not going to hear anywhere else.
Absolutely. And, you know, one of those key components of intelligence as defined by Wiki is creativity. And like we were explaining at the top of the show with AlphaGo, it's already got that, Tony, because one of the most common kind of ways for the game to be played is you take the third and fourth lines. All the different nuances of this game, not important. But what AlphaGo done was it took the fifth line. Now, that knocked this world champion player totally off kilter. Never seen anything like this before. And why I bring that up is because it got creative. It knew it was a 1 in 10,000 chance that move would actually work. It was long odds. But it also knew that taking that risk and doing something new, well, it was something humans had never tried before. And it couldn't have modeled that from anything it had seen in the past. It got creative, Tony.
Yeah, and that's, you know, in that same video you and I were watching, we're talking about the fact that the experts, the world champions, the guys that wrote the books on Go, felt that they were freed. Their minds were freed by AlphaGo because they had the restraints of all the rules and all of the past history of Go removed. The game is very simple. It only has a few rules. But they, as you said at the beginning of the show, they actually have schools that kids, when they show promise at an early age, are brought into these schools, and they spend 10 to 12 hours every day learning how to develop their strategies. Now, these are not tactics and strategies that you would find in chess, because those are logical linear progressions. What they teach in Go is to use your imagination, operate at an intuitive level. But even those masters felt constrained. And when they were confronted with or presented the solutions that AlphaGo had created on its own, they were shocked, but then they said, we feel like we've been freed from all of these constraints that have existed for thousands of years. I think it's like 2,000 years or something this game has been played. So I'm going to just read from Wikipedia again. Imagination is called the faculty of imagining. It's the creative ability to form images, ideas, and sensations in the mind from input of the senses. Again, I'm reinforcing for people so that you can go home and think about this. These are actual computer systems that are taking in sensory inputs as well as raw data, 0 and 1s, and it's forming images and ideas in its own mind, separate from any input from human beings, and therefore no control from human beings. Go ahead.
Well, Tony, you were actually talking about the Turing test a couple of moments ago. And of course, this is if we can differentiate whether we're speaking to a computer or not, right? And I was watching something else from Deepmind today as well. And this totally, absolutely renders the Turing test to the recycle bin. It really does, because usually when it comes to voice sampling and stuff like that, what they do is they get an actor to record maybe 30 hours worth of speaking. What they then do is they break it up into all the different syllables. And then when you play it back, it sounds kind of like Siri, not quite too human, right? But now, Deepmind, it's doing something totally different. Because what it does is it doesn't look at the individual syllables, it looks at the actual wave forms. And I'm going to play for you just quickly the difference between Deepmind AI speaking, text to speech, and just the ordinary way that they do it. Take a listen to this.
50%. So I'm just going to play you a couple of samples so you can hear for yourself the difference, hopefully. So there's two samples. One is going to be from the concatenative system and then from WaveNet. And it's about a strange film, I think, because this is one of the 100 test phrases that Google uses to evaluate how good a system is. So this is the concatenative.
The Blue Lagoon is a 1980 American romance and adventure film directed by Randall Kleiser.
This is WaveNet.
The Blue Lagoon is a 1980 American romance and adventure film directed by Randall Kleiser.
So there's the difference there. And Tony, like I say, it doesn't take from samples of somebody speaking in the past. Oh, no. It actually creates the waveform itself.
Yeah, it's looking at the raw data. And as we've said a lot, if you look at 0s and 1s, they form geometric shapes. Those geometric shapes form the waveform, whether you're talking about a square wave or a sine wave as an example. But yes, the shape of the data, the peaks and the valleys of the data, the geometry of the data is how it learns. Before we run out of time, I want to make an announcement about an upcoming show, because I hate to not be able to bring this up. From the world of chemtrails, one of the absolute leading researchers and advocates out there, Dane Wigington. Oh. Dane Wigington will be joining Kevin and myself on Friday the 30th of this month. Dane Wigington is going to be with us for the first hour from 4 to 5 on the 30th of this month. Please don't miss that show. And if you have questions, email them to me or to Kev, and we'll try to bring them up. It's only going to be an hour, but he's been gracious enough to join Kevin and myself. Again, that's Dane Wigington from the chemtrail research world. Okay?
And as a little warm-up to that, on Monday, coming up on the Kev Baker Show, we're going to be joined by Ilana Freeland. She's going to be coming on as well. She'll be talking about the space fence, stuff like this, chemtrails. I think that'll be a nice appetizer, Tony, for the Wigington show. How did you manage to set that show up, man? Great work.
Well, I want to thank my good friend Lynn Liaz from the Lynn Liaz channel on YouTube. Huge YouTube channel. She actually asked me if I would like for her to make the connection. So hats off to her. I really appreciate that. I also have another guest coming up for another show, but it hasn't been finalized. But he is a Hollywood producer. He's made over 30 films, and I'll be bringing that once it's firmed and we know exactly when. But he is going to be bringing a television series, Christian-based, on TV here very soon, and he will be joining us as well, Kev.
It just goes from strength to strength on the Anthony Pat Show, the Kev Baker Show, Truth Frequency Radio. We are flying right now. And before we go, Tony, You mentioned Lynn Liaz there. Now, of course, Lynn, she's a contributor to Entangled. And where can people get a hold of Entangled, this brilliant e-magazine?
Yeah, it's really growing, and I really appreciate, like Rebecca, she's in chat room here today. She's a contributor. We have an artist from Spain who is going to be contributing, a huge artist from Spain, be contributing his works to the Entangled. That's at anthonypatch.com. It's right there on the homepage. You can subscribe there. That really helps support our research, folks. I never ask for money. All I'm saying is, if you like the leading edge, if you like the tip of the spear to continue, then I need the financial support as well as Kev Baker to keep this thing going. So with that said, we have Lynn Liaz as a contributor. We have Chris. We have a number of people. We have about 6 brand new contributors to Entangled for this upcoming issue. We may have a few more, but it grows every month. And in between the publication on the 1st of every month, I send out additional information, and we will continue to send more and more so that you get good value for your annual subscription. So Entangled Magazine is really diversified. It has art, it has scripture, it has hard research, it has funny stuff. Robbie, who's in the chat room here, he as well.
And we are out of time, and Sarah in the chat room, fascinating and terrifying. It certainly is, but we are here to guide you into this new paradigm that is unfolding all around us. Until tomorrow night, wherever you are, make it TFR.
And didn't touch that dial.
D-Wave, quantum computing, artificial intelligence, and quantum physics. And he's the author of a number of books, including 2048, Diamonds in the Rough, Covert Catastrophe, Revising Reality, and soon to be Coalescence as well. He's also the man behind Entangled e-magazine, where you can find Tony, myself, and a lot of other people contributing to this new project that we're all working on. And it always gives me great pleasure to welcome you back onto the show, Tony. And I know we're good friends on that now, but it's still as exciting for me to bring you onto the show, man. How you doing?
Hey, don't talk about exciting around me.
And Tony, before we even get into any of this tonight, I mean, you spent a large part of your life working as a paramedic. Now, today in the UK, there was absolutely awful story that was breaking overnight. We had a fire engulfing a 24-storey block of flats called Grenfell Tower in London. It started at just after midnight last night, and I can tell you that just before coming to air tonight, nearly 24 hours later, there's still small pockets of fire burning in that building. This place was home to 125 families, and they think there was somewhere between 400 and 600 people in the building at the time. Now, there's a lot of questions to be answered here, because so far there's reports of 12 people losing their lives, over 70 in hospital. There's no fire alarms going off in any of the flats, no warning given. And the fire policy that was given to all of the residents, and not just that flat, but others like it, was if there is a fire in one of the flats, the standard operating procedure is to stay put, and emergency services will come to the rescue. Anyone who's seen any of the scenes coming out from that tragic event last night will know that staying in place probably would have meant certain death. Like I say, there's going to be a lot of questions to be answered on that one. But Tony, you worked in the paramedic kind of field. You've dealt with these kind of things. You've seen my report when I put it out this morning. What was your thoughts when you were looking at that?
Criminal. The whole thing's criminal. This is a standard case from what we know, and I can only base it on what little information we have right now. But to not have fire alarms, fire doors, and a sprinkler system in a building of that size, and what appears to be flammable material as a facade that was placed around the building when it was redeveloped, that's just pure criminality. That's a disaster in the making. I can't imagine any building That building, I think it was built in 1972. I cannot imagine any building in a city in the United States of that age not having a fire sprinkler system already within it. And nobody tells somebody to shelter in place in the face of a fire.
Absolutely. And, you know, our very own Johnny Whistles, he posted a video on Facebook today. I'm going to play this because this is from a resident down there. And I think he sums it all up, and then we'll get fired right into the main crux of the show tonight. But take a listen to this.
One thing I wanted to say, though, this thing that they're all saying about, oh, it might have been a fridge that exploded or something like that. I don't know about all of that, but what I do know is they did regeneration last year to that building that they're talking about doing to all of these buildings. They did it to that building only, £10 million they're talking about, and put these shoddy plastic things on there that set up a light because they want more reasons to knock these blocks down. There's two options. They could either regenerate the blocks or they could knock them down. And after that, I'm not so sure that was totally an accident. I'm not even gonna lie. Like, I'm not even gonna lie to you. You could pause me there, but I'm not gonna lie. The whole situation that's going on in this area, the way that they don't want us, the way that they don't want us here, and they put those rich man's blocks over there, and then they tell certain man in Frinstead they can't even go into that section. That's outrageous. I can't lie. The way that they treat man in here is terrible, innit? So I understand. I can't even take the belief out of my mind that wasn't just an accident. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm not gonna lie. I think it's fucked, and I think. But we don't know. It's so early. Yeah, we don't know. But you're talking about the regeneration that happened last year to apparently make these blocks better, and then these fires have never happened. I've lived here my entire life. My mom's lived here.
This is the Cam Baker Show.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Are you ready, ladies and gentlemen, for another hour of live radio with me, Kev Baker? And you're tuned in live to the Kev Baker Show right here on Truth Frequency Radio Network. And of course, just like every other night, I have got my trusty co-host along with me for this hour of madness that lies ahead, Johnny Whistles. How are you doing, brother?
I'm doing fine, Kev. Thanks very much. Looking forward to this one tonight.
It's going to be brilliant, John, because, I mean, you're a chess fan, right? You play chess with your boy, and we were discussing before the show that machine that beat Kasparov back in the day, remember? I think it was about 20 years ago, John.
Oh, yeah, Big Blue. I can remember that one, Kev.
And like
I wasn't too happy I actually beat him.
No, it wasn't. Like I was explaining to you, tonight's show is going to be nothing like Big Blue. We'll get into that in just a moment, because tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we're joined by our good friend, regular guest, and of course the man who hosts the Anthony Patch Show right here on the network, the man himself, Anthony Patch. Now, for new listeners out there, you can find Anthony's work over at anthonypatch.com. And Anthony has really carved out a niche for himself as being the leading speaker when it comes to all things to do with CERN.
Very long time. And these kind of things have never, ever happened in this.
And I'll just pause it there because the language gets a bit more colourful. But John, your thoughts on this just quickly.
Well, what the guy was saying, Kev, he's talking about all these rich flats, the rich man's homes that are right next to this place, and it really does. It's a word that never gets used a lot, Kevin. It's gentrification, and I definitely think this is all part of it.
Absolutely, and of course the BBC trying their best to shut that witness up. And of course, if that tower block is to collapse, it will only become the fourth building in history to collapse under the weight or under its own weight due to the kind of effects of fire. The other three buildings were all on 9/11. And I'll let you all ponder that. So then, tonight, we've got Anthony on the show here. And Anthony, even before we move on, because there was tragedy hit the US as well, and I think you were wanting to mention that before we even got going tonight.
Yeah, our hearts and prayers go out to the congressman and the congressman's aides and the police officers involved in the Arlington, Virginia shooting today that took place with a lone gunman with an AK-47. I want to underscore the bravery of the two police officers who literally stepped into the line of fire and were shot themselves in taking down this gunman. this underscores the bravery of people who work, especially in the police departments. And a lot of times